I told them that everyone has a story they're scared to tell, and that fear is usually a sign that it needs to be told. Afterward, a girl came up to me. She was quiet, shy, and she handed me a small note that said, "You made me feel brave." I folded it and kept it in my pocket. It's still there. Every time I touch it, I remember why I started sharing my truth in the first place. I've learned that healing isn't a straight line. Some days you feel strong, other days you fall apart for no reason at all. But even on those days, there's a kind of grace in simply surviving. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been where I've been. Maybe you've trusted the wrong person, or stayed quiet when you should have spoken up. Maybe you've been told that your story doesn't matter. But it does, it always does. Because the moment you tell it, the moment you stop hiding from it, you take back everything that was ever taken from you: your voice, your truth, your power. And when I think about everything that happened, everything I lost, I realize something simple but strong. I may have been broken, but I was never destroyed. This story isn't just mine, it's ours. It's every person who's been doubted, every voice that's been ignored, every heart that's been told to stay quiet. So, if you hear my words tonight, remember this: your story has power. Speak it, share it, let the world feel its weight. Because silence doesn't protect you, truth does. And one day, when you finally step out of the shadows, you'll see what I see now: that survival isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning. My name is Alic Rose. People used to tell me I was lucky. I had a good job, a husband who smiled in photos, and a little apartment that always smelled like vanilla candles. From the outside, my life looked like something you'd scroll past on Instagram and think, "She's got it all together." Most mornings started the same: coffee machine humming, my playlist filling the kitchen, sunlight slipping through half-closed blinds. He'd kiss my cheek, grab his laptop bag, and say, "Don't work too hard, Rose." I'd laugh, tell him to text when he got to the office. And for a few quiet seconds I would honestly believe we were happy. But small things began to bother me. Messages left unread, phone calls taken in the hallway, the way he flinched when I walked into the room. I told myself every couple goes through phases. Still, something in his eyes had changed, like he was looking through me instead of at me. At work, I tried to drown it out. I'm a project coordinator for a housing nonprofit, mostly desk work, but we visit neighborhoods a lot. Some days I loved it. Other days, I noticed how people looked at me and my coworkers differently. When my colleague Devin spoke, folks listened. When I spoke, some looked past me or corrected me like I was new. It was subtle, but it wore me down, the same quiet kind of dismissal I started to feel at home. One Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Just a few words: "You deserve to know." Attached was a blurry photo: my husband, standing outside a cafe, leaning close to someone I didn't recognize. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was confusion, disbelief, a kind of cold shock that spread through my chest. That evening, I tried to ask him about it. He laughed it off, said it must be someone who looks like him, said people love to stir drama online. I wanted to believe him, I really did, but the way he avoided my eyes told me more than any photo could. After that night, everything felt staged. Every good morning text, every dinner conversation, every touch. I started noticing details I'd ignored before: SCITs from places we'd never been, the smell of a cologne that wasn't his, a tone of voice that turned sharp whenever I asked questions. Then something stranger began to happen. A few of our mutual friends stopped talking to me. One even hinted that I was causing trouble at home, that I was too emotional. I wondered who had been talking to them, what story they'd heard. Around that time, my team at work was organizing an outreach event in a nearby neighborhood. It should have been routine, but a city permit mix-up turned tense. A man from the office handling approvals raised his voice, blaming me even though the error wasn't mine. When I tried to explain, he cut me off. "Let someone more experienced handle this." I had been there longer than he had. The words stung not just because they were unfair, but because I realized this wasn't the first time I'd been dismissed like that. At home, at work, it was the same pattern. My voice didn't seem to matter. That night, I sat on the balcony, the city buzzing below, thinking about how easily a story can be rewritten. My husband's version of events, the coworkers' assumptions, the quiet biases no one names, but everyone feels. When he came home, I asked again, calm this time, "Is there someone else?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted something important. Then he said, "Alic, you're imagining things. Don't embarrass yourself." The words hit harder than I expected. I nodded, pretending to believe him, but inside something broke. I realized the version of my life I'd been defending didn't exist. The people I trusted could twist any truth into a rumor if it helped them stay comfortable. That weekend, while he was out, I searched through the drawer where he kept old mail. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe proof, maybe peace. I found a small envelope tucked behind a stack of bills. Inside was a printed confirmation for a hotel reservation. 2 guests, a date from 2 weeks earlier. I sat there staring at it, my hands trembling, trying to make the numbers blur into something else. But the truth was right there in black and white. I wanted to confront him, scream, cry something, but instead, I just folded the paper neatly and put it back. Because at that moment, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. The life I'd been clinging to was already gone. I was the only one still pretending it was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the apartment made me flinch: the hum of the fridge, the creak of the hallway floorboards, the faint buzz of his phone lighting up in the next room. I thought about how easy it is for someone's story to disappear when no one wants to hear it. As dawn crept in, painting the walls a soft gray, I realized something else. The truth I'd uncovered wasn't just about him. It was about every time I'd been told to stay quiet, to let it go, to be grateful. The sunlight touched the edge of our wedding photo on the dresser, and for the first time, I didn't feel comfort. I felt distanced, like I was looking at a stranger's life instead of my own. That's when I decided I would stop defending the silence that was breaking me. I would find out what else he'd been hiding, no matter what it costs. Because somewhere between the lies and the looks, between the whispers and the warnings, I had lost myself, and I was ready to find out who I really was, no matter how painful the truth might be. The morning after I found that hotel receipt, I couldn't look at him the same. Everything he said sounded rehearsed, like lines he'd practiced in front of a mirror. Still, I kept quiet. I wanted him to believe I was still blind, because I needed time to see the whole picture before I confronted him again. At work, I threw myself into projects. I told myself that if I just stayed busy, the noise in my head would calm down. But it didn't. Every spreadsheet, every meeting, felt like a background hum beneath one single thought. He lied to me. That week, our nonprofit hosted a community meeting downtown. I was supposed to present updates about a housing program I'd managed for months. When I started speaking, I noticed the same city official who had cut me off before. He leaned back, arms crossed, glancing at his phone while I talked. When a man on my team repeated almost the same points, the official nodded and said, "Exactly what we needed to hear." It wasn't just irritation I felt, it was something heavier. A sense that no matter how much effort I put in, some people only heard certain voices. I wondered if that was part of why my husband's words carried more weight than mine when rumors started. People wanted his story to be true because it was easier than questioning their own bias. That evening, he came home cheerful, talking about a new work project. I watched him unpack a box of files and remembered the smell of that perfume from before. I asked where he'd been. He smiled without meeting my eyes and said, "You really have to stop worrying, Alic." Then he changed the subject, asking about dinner like nothing had happened. Something inside me snapped, quietly but completely. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for him to hand me honesty. I'd have to find it myself. Over the next few days, I began keeping notes, small things, phone times, locations, phrases he used, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Each note felt like a piece of glass, small, sharp, undeniable. Then one night, while he slept, his phone lit up again, the same number as before. This time, I didn't open the message. I just stared at the screen, watching it fade back to black, and realized I didn't even want to know the details anymore. I already knew enough. The next morning, I called my sister, who lived a few towns away. We hadn't spoken much lately. He always said she didn't understand our life. But when she picked up, her voice was soft, the way it used to be. I told her everything, my voice trembling. She didn't sound surprised. She just said, "Come stay with me for a few days." I packed a small bag while he was at work. Only essentials: laptop, some clothes, my grandmother's necklace. When I zipped it up, my hands stopped shaking for the first time in weeks. I left a note on the table. "I need space to think. Don't call me." Driving away, the city looked different. The same buildings, the same traffic lights, but it all felt unfamiliar, like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. I realized how much of my life had been built around keeping other people comfortable, keeping peace even when it hurt. At my sister's place, I finally slept. 4 hours. When I woke up, sunlight spilled across the room, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel heavy, but peace didn't last. 2 days later, he started calling from unknown numbers, leaving messages that swung between apologies and blame. "You're overreacting," he'd say in one, then in another, "You've ruined everything." I saved them all, not out of spite, but because I needed to remember how quickly love could twist into something else. That night, I sat with my sister on the porch, telling her about work, about how I felt invisible there too. She looked at me for a long time before saying, "You can't fix a world that refuses to see you, but you can make sure it doesn't erase you." Her words stayed with me. As I lay in bed later, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. "This story isn't over yet, but for the first time, I know it's mine." And deep down, I could feel that something bigger was waiting: truth, consequence, maybe even justice. I didn't know what it would look like, but I knew I was done being quiet. When I woke the next morning at my sister's, the world outside felt almost too bright. Birds were loud, coffee smelled stronger, and for a strange second I believed I could start over. Then I checked my phone. 6 missed calls, 3 voicemails, all from him. The last one just said, "You'll regret this." I wanted to delete them, to pretend they didn't exist, but I saved them instead. Proof. I kept reminding myself, not just of what he'd done, but of who he'd become. That afternoon, my sister went to work, and I stayed behind. The quiet made my thoughts louder. I began sorting through emails and bank statements, searching for anything that could tell me what else he'd been hiding. That's when I noticed several transfers, more frequent, to a company name I didn't recognize. The dates lined up with the weekends he said he'd been on work trips. I felt that same cold shock spreading again. It wasn't about the money, it was the certainty that every piece of my life had been rewritten while I was looking the other way. Still, I wasn't ready to call the police or a lawyer. I wanted truth first, then action. So I decided to visit the cafe from that first photograph. It was a weekday afternoon, nearly empty. I sat near the window, watching. After 20 minutes, I saw him walk past outside alone but talking on his phone, his face tight with worry. For a heartbeat, I almost ran out to confront him. Then I stopped. I realized that confrontation had always been his territory. Loud words, calm explanations, me shrinking smaller. This time, I needed a different kind of strength, the kind that came from staying silent long enough to see clearly. I left before he noticed me and drove back to my sister's. On the way, a police car pulled someone over a few blocks ahead. I slowed down and watched from a distance as the officer's tone changed the moment he saw who was behind the wheel. My chest tightened. The whole scene, short, ordinary, unfair, reminded me that the bias I felt at work wasn't just mine. It was everywhere, woven into every decision, every assumption. Some people were always given the benefit of the doubt. Others, like me, had to keep proving we were worth listening to. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about all the small moments that had led here. The coworkers who'd talked over me. The neighbors who'd looked past me. The husband who'd decided his comfort mattered more than my dignity. It all blended into one pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. So I started writing pages and pages in that same journal. Not just about him, but about the system that made his story easier to believe than mine. I wrote about every meeting where I was dismissed, every comment that made me question my own voice. The next morning, my sister read a few pages and said quietly, "You should share this, Alic. People need to hear it." I wasn't sure. Telling the story out loud meant reliving it, but silence had already cost me too much. Later that day, I went back to my apartment while he was at work. I packed the rest of my things: books, photos, the plant that had somehow survived even when I hadn't. The walls felt different now, smaller. On the kitchen counter lay another note from him. "We can fix this. Just come home." I folded it once and slid it into the same envelope as the hotel receipt. They were both pieces of truth now. When I left, I didn't lock the door behind me. I didn't need to. I wasn't coming back. Driving away, I thought about the countless people I'd met through my nonprofit work, the ones who'd lost homes, jobs, or relationships because someone else's version of events sounded more believable. Their stories echoed mine, and mine echoed theirs. By the time I reached the highway, tears blurred the road, but I kept driving, because even though everything was falling apart, something inside me had finally settled. I knew who I was again, and deep down, I understood that what had happened to me wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a mirror of a larger truth about the world I lived in. I whispered to myself, barely louder than the wind. They won't erase me. Not this time. When I finally told my story publicly, I didn't plan it. It wasn't part of some brave speech or dramatic moment. It happened one quiet afternoon, sitting in front of my laptop, staring at a blank post for nearly an hour. My hands shook as I typed. Not every detail, not every scarge, enough truth for people to see me clearly for once. I wrote about love that turned into control, about trust that was slowly chipped away by lies, about what it feels like to be doubted not because of evidence, but because of who you are. I didn't name him, didn't accuse anyone directly. I just said, sometimes, survival means choosing to believe yourself even when no one else does. When I pressed post, my heart raced like I'd jumped off a cliff. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the notifications began to roll in. At first, there was kindness, old friends, distant coworkers, strangers who simply wrote, "I believe you." But then came the others, the ones who told me to move on, to stop playing the victim, to think about his reputation. The same tired lines that have silenced too many voices before mine. That night, I turned off my phone and went for a walk. The city lights blurred around me. I passed people laughing outside restaurants, holding hands, living lives untouched by my storm. For a moment, I envied them. Then I realized maybe they weren't untouched. Maybe some of them carried their own storms quietly, just better hidden than mine. A week later, I was invited to speak at a local community event about truth and resilience. I almost said no, but something in me whispered, "You've already started, don't stop now." Standing on that stage was harder than I'd imagined. The microphone felt heavy in my hand. My palms were sweating. But when I started to speak, the words flowed out like I'd been waiting my whole life to release them. I told them how easy it is to lose yourself when the world keeps asking you to prove your pain. I told them that silence protects no one except the ones who cause it. And when I looked up, I saw people nodding, some even crying. It was the first time I felt that maybe my story could matter for more than just me. After the event, a young woman came up to me, eyes red, voice trembling. She said, "I thought I was the only one." And just like that, I understood something powerful. Our stories are bridges. When we tell them, someone else finds their way across. The days that followed weren't easy. There were still rumors, people who whispered, "She's exaggerating," or "She just wants attention." But their voices no longer carried the same weight, because now, mine was louder, clearer, steadier. One evening, I got an email from a journalist who'd seen my talk. She wanted to feature my story in a series about women reclaiming their voices. My first instinct was fear. Exposure meant more scrutiny. But then I remembered the girl who once couldn't sleep, who wrote her pain down in a journal just to make sense of it. I owed her this courage. When the article came out, it didn't just tell my story, told the story of so many others who'd written to me, thanking me for saying what they couldn't. But even then, part of me still wondered if true justice existed. Could words alone change anything? Could awareness really heal what the world kept breaking? That question haunted me until one morning, I received a message from a man I didn't know. He said his sister had been through something similar, and that hearing my story made her finally speak up. He ended with, "You saved her." I sat there for a long time, staring at that message. For the first time, I didn't cry out of pain, I cried out of relief, because maybe that was the point all along. Maybe we don't tell our stories to fix the past, but to stop it from repeating. That night, I wrote in my journal again, "Healing isn't loud, it's steady. It's waking up every day and choosing to still believe in good people, even when you've seen the worst." And for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. It's been almost a year since everything fell apart, but looking back now, I don't see it as destruction, I see it as the start of something new. The apartment I live in now is small, but it's mine. The walls are lined with pictures of the people who stood by me, not the ones who disappeared when things got difficult. There's a quiet peace here. Some mornings, when sunlight fills the kitchen, I catch myself smiling for no reason. That's when I realize I made it, not just through the heartbreak or the fear, but through the silence. The silence was the hardest part. The way it made me doubt my memories, my emotions, even my worth. But now, when I look in the mirror, I see someone who doesn't need permission to speak anymore. People still ask me, "Alic, how did you move on?" I tell them the truth. I didn't move on. I moved through. I carried every memory, every scar, and turned them into something that could help someone else. Pain doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It fades only when you face it. After the article, I started volunteering at a support group for people who've gone through betrayal and social bias. The first few sessions, I just listened. Stories poured out of strangers' mouths, different details, same wounds. It reminded me that injustice isn't always loud. Sometimes, it hides in small moments, in people's assumptions, in the way truth gets filtered through someone else's comfort. One evening, a young man in the group said something that stayed with me. He said, "Sometimes the hardest part isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving yourself for believing them." I remember nodding, because I knew exactly what he meant. There are still nights when I replay everything in my mind, the lies, the fear, the look in his eyes when I walked away. But now, those memories don't break me. They remind me how far I've come. A few weeks ago, I was invited to speak again, this time at a college campus. When I stood in front of that crowd, I didn't feel nervous anymore. I felt grounded. I told them that everyone has a story they're scared to tell, and that fear is usually a sign that it needs to be told. Afterward, a girl came up to me. She was quiet, shy, and she handed me a small note that said, "You made me feel brave." I folded it and kept it in my pocket. It's still there. Every time I touch it, I remember why I started sharing my truth in the first place. I've learned that healing isn't a straight line. Some days you feel strong, other days you fall apart for no reason at all. But even on those days, there's a kind of grace in simply surviving. If you're listening to this, maybe you've been where I've been. Maybe you've trusted the wrong person, or stayed quiet when you should have spoken up. Maybe you've been told that your story doesn't matter. But it does, it always does. Because the moment you tell it, the moment you stop hiding from it, you take back everything that was ever taken from you: your voice, your truth, your power. And when I think about everything that happened, everything I lost, I realize something simple but strong. I may have been broken, but I was never destroyed. This story isn't just mine, it's ours. It's every person who's been doubted, every voice that's been ignored, every heart that's been told to stay quiet. So, if you hear my words tonight, remember this: your story has power. Speak it, share it, let the world feel its weight. Because silence doesn't protect you, truth does. And one day, when you finally step out of the shadows, you'll see what I see now: that survival isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning.
Think about it. Could this happen to you? Some stories aren't just heard, they're felt. Behind every truth, there's a hidden fear. This story won't just shake your mind, it'll haunt your soul. Who could imagine the truth would be this terrifying? The story ends, but the questions stay alive.